All right, today I just want to do a review of what we talked about last week first. So I'm going to open up the Nichols program, have opened up the Nichols program. I'm going to walk through that real quick. Remember, the form itself has one little tricky part to it, and that's that this text box has a font, did we talk about this, that is Courier New. Because the Times New Roman fonts, the Arial fonts, all the rest of those are proportionally spaced fonts. Each character takes up only as much room width-wise as it needs. So if you want to create columns of characters like we want to do in our output, you have to change the font to a monospace font. Most common monospace font is Courier New. Also, this text box, this is a text box, not a label, even though it's only containing outputs. I used a text box because I have a scroll box with that, and I don't get one of those with a label. Inside the code, we didn't do anything terribly special. We did define a new constant called CR, and it's defined as a carriage return, a backslash R, which is a carriage return, and a backslash N, which is a new line. In C#, to go down to the new line and move back to the left margin, so to speak, you have to do both of those. If you do one or the other, you don't get the effects that you want. And instead of typing that all over the place and trying to remember what it is, I defined a constant called CR. And so wherever you see that, a CR, I'm basically doing a carriage return in the middle of a string. They're just a bunch of characters. Backslash R is a character. Backslash N is a character in the ASCII character sequence. 10 and 13, I always forget which one's which. Even though they don't show up on the screen, they're still characters. And I've just inserted them in the middle of my string, so that when I display that string, it automatically moves to the next line wherever I tell it to. Inside of our program, we created a string called, inside of our function for button click, we created a string called results. And then we built that string, and there's a bunch of commented out code here that figures out whether or not we need to attach an S to the end of my statement because I was being anal or professional, depending on the way you want to look at it. I was creating an array or an output that looks very nice. Let me show you what the output looks like, and we'll talk about how I got there. So 0 nickels, 1 nickel, that S is what this first part of code is resolving. Do I put an S on it or don't I? That's the hard way. It takes 5 lines of code. The easier way is to use an inline if. It's right here. Can't see all of it, but we can see most of it. If the nickel value is not equal to 1, attach the S. Otherwise, what follows here, the colon, otherwise what follows is a space. Put a space there instead. So when I'm looking at this, this says, first of all, display the nickel value. That's my loop counter. Remember, we're using a for loop here. The for loop uses a counter of some kind. It's just a variable. You usually start counting at 0. But we could count at 1, could start counting anywhere. Declared it right inside the for loop, which means that this variable nickel is not available to me down here at all. It's gone. When I get to the end of the loop, that variable gets released. Started it at 0, and then in my results string, I concatenate the 0. But what this string format says is give it 3 spaces. Even if it only needs 1, like a 0 does, only needs 1 column, give it 3. Because the 3 is a positive number, it is filled with spaces to the left. Then I displayed the word nickel, and then either an S or a space. Then I'm still concatenating on the same line here, I just split them so that we can see them, the equal sign. And then the value of the nickel formatted for currency in 6 spaces so that the dollar signs, the decimal places, and the ones columns all line up. Now I went to 1,000 nickels in this example, and so it kind of messed up the alignment, but that's a quick fix if I needed to fix it. Just change this width to a 4 when the program's not running. It's better. Okay. So what we learned in here is, first of all, how to use a for loop. A for loop, we have to initialize its counter. then put a semicolon and designate the condition under which the loop should continue. As long as the nickel value is less than 1,000, keep looping, is what that says. Every time we hit the bottom of the loop, we automatically, and this is the bottom, it's the end curly bracket. C# recognizes that, automatically comes up and bumps up the counter. It then compares to the nickel counter again to see, are we still less than 1,000? Yep, keep going. Over and over and over again. Displaying this format. Questions about the for loop? Then we learned about string format that helps us display numbers in a certain width of fields. We can't do that with toString. Everything else we're doing here with we can do a toString, the C2. We can do a toString. The adding an S, we can do a toString. What we can't do is get the field width to be stuck at 3, so it always takes up 3 spaces. String format allows us to do that. Everything from here to there is identical, if you notice, in all these string formats. It always starts out the same. What the 0 means is grab the first thing on the list, and there's only going to be one the way we do these things. The 4 is the width. The 6 here is the width, then there's a colon and a C2 saying formatted for currency. 2 decimal places. We had to play around with that a little bit to get it to work the way we wanted it to, but ultimately we got good results. And then I showed you we ran it again, and it ran it 1,000, and it took 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds to run because we were concatenating to the text box immediately. Not a good plan. So what I did instead, what we did is we modified it to create a variable that's in memory, modified it, and then at the very end transferred it to the output instead of doing it all at once or doing it in piecemeal. We did it all at once. That sped up the process significantly so that it almost looks instantaneous. What I didn't talk about last time that I do want to talk about is the flowchart for this. Come on. There we go. Here's the flowchart, and notice it also includes the pseudocode. Starting in Unit 5, you may do both in the same place. I've already received a couple of Unit 5 programs, and I get a tow chart, or the document that contains the tow chart. It might not have a tow chart. I'm not looking at the tow chart. All I'm looking at is a pseudocode. You could take that pseudocode and actually put it inside your flowchart and just send me one document. That would be fine. But here's the flowchart. In my code, I use the word results instead of message. But here's my for loop. Starts counting at 0, and in this example, it stopped at 50. I modified it to show you how slow it is. Made it 1,000. But start at 0, as long as we're less than the end value, keep looping. Add the text to the message. Do it over and over and over again, and every time through the loop, add 1. We get greater than 50, then we finally get out and transfer the message to the text box. So that's identical to what the code says. Here's the pseudocode. The pseudocode looks very similar. Set the message to the empty string. And then for nickels equals 1 to 1,000 by 1. The by 1 is optional. You can leave that out. And just say from 1 to 50, and we assume by 1. The only time you have to include the by clause is when you are modifying the loop counter by something other than 1, -1, 10, 5, 2. Today, a half. For each loop value, add the text. And then bottom of the loop, go back up. Again, you the programmer, when you look at the flow chart, it's not too hard to tell that when we hit the bottom of the loop, we go back up and bump it up by 1. But you need to know that if you're looking at pseudocode, when you hit the bottom of the loop, it's automatically going to go up, increment the loop counter, and check to see if we're done yet. Automatically. Same thing that happened in C#. We wrote, if you look at this, it's really only 1, 2 statements long, and then there's an end curly bracket. bunch of comments. It's only 2 statements long. Do this over and over and over again, and it automatically bumps the loop counter up, automatically makes sure it's still supposed to loop, knows when to quit because we told it. Quit when this is no longer true. So what you have here is example number 1 with the flowchart and the pseudocode that goes with it. Questions? Okay. Now let's open up the other one and do another example. So in your for loop example folder, if you want to follow along, let's do the percents program. The technique is going to be pretty much the same. This time, however, I have an instructor who wants to know how much is each quiz point value worth. In our text box here, we enter in how many points the quiz is worth. So we are actually modifying our program now based on that input. Our loop, when we first write it, will go through the loop 60 times because we're going to go up by halves. It's going to go through it 60 times, but if I change that to 50 or 100, it'll go through as many times as it needs to from the beginning score of 0 all the way down. Again, there's a text box to hold our results. And here's the method. It has a double. We get the score from the user. I could put a try catch in here. That might not be a bad idea. It's been a while. Remember to put in a try catch, type try and tab a couple of times. There's your try catch. And move this up inside and indent it so that Voker doesn't mark you wrong for not indenting stuff right. In here, we put in a message box. Dot show. This is just review. Remember, we can put an error message across the top. It's the title for my message box, and then I can choose the buttons. I just want an OK button. Then I get to choose the icons. Oops. And the one I want is an error. So that's the enhanced message box. A couple of you have been playing with that already. I would say at this point, after Unit 5, or in Unit 5, 6, if you've got to display a message box, make it a complete message box with those 4 parts. You can test that real quick. Or not. There's my error icon, there's the title, the OK button, and my message. So that seems to work. And now we can get to the meat of the issue. And the first thing I did is grab the text box, the number, and it's now in max score. That's my loop control variable. That variable is going to control how many times we loop. The instructors told me they would like the scores from highest to lowest because he's got a bunch of good students, so we don't get too many 0s and 5s and 10s. We get mostly 30s and 20s and 27s and those kinds of things. So we want these in reverse order. We are also going to display and fill our message box again, or our text box. So once again, I'm going to just create a variable called results. I think I'll do it up here. String results. And I'm going to initialize that to the empty string. This has a second effect, by the way. What I didn't show you in the last recording is if we had run that Nichols program before I fixed it, and we hit the calculate button twice, it would have kept adding and adding and adding more to the end. But because we're creating this variable that gets initialized to the empty string, that can't happen anymore. Every time you click the go button here, the results variable gets cleared out. So that's a nice little side effect of that. It's already been initialized to the empty string. And so now, how do I want the results to look? probably something like, I'm just going to visualize it here, probably something like 100.0, or let's just do 30. 30.0 points is equal to 100.0%. I think that's what I want my output to look like. I'm going to put that in a loop to display it over and over and over again. So I'm going to start off by simply displaying the quiz score that the student got, all those scores from 30 down to 0. And I'm using 30 as an example, but we can change that to anything. I'm going to start at the top. So I'm going to use a for loop for this. For, and this is a double, right? Because my loop counter is going up by halves because we want half points on this quiz. Double points equals, where do I start? If I want to go from top to bottom. 30, good guess. Where's my 30 hiding? It's in the variable. All right, whatever the user typed for the max is in my variable. So I want to start at max score. Under what conditions do I keep going as long as points is greater than or equal to 0? Let's try to flip the greater than sign around. In the Nichols example, we were working from the bottom up. So we had to say, as long as you're less than the max, keep going. Now we're working from the top down. As long as points is greater than or equal to 0. We'll put the 0 on here, even though I think my instructor could probably figure out that 0 points is 0%. We'll put it in just to finish it up. And then finally, 3 parts of a for loop, we have to tell it, what do we do to the counter every time through the loop? We take my points and subtract a half a point. And remember, in C#, you have to put the 0 before the decimal point. That's the definition of my loop. Curly bracket for all the stuff that goes inside. Where do you start? Under what conditions do you continue? And what do you do to the counter every time through the loop? Now I'm going to build my contents in pieces. And one of the things I do know is after my loop is done, I'm going to transfer the message into my text box. And here the text box is called text percents equals my results. So inside the loop, I'm going to mess with the results, but at the end, I'm going to display them in that text box. So what do I do in here? Every time through the loop, I'm going to add stuff to the results. That's pretty constant in these programs. I'm going to add stuff to the results. I think the first thing I want to add is simply show me what's in points. And a carriage return. Oh, I don't have a carriage return defined here, so I better come up here and define that real quick. Private constant string CR equals. Somebody asked me, isn't there a way I could put that into Volcker Tools? Yes, but then you would have to type Volcker Tools.cr. There's no good way around that. And so I think it might be best just to make your own constant up here. And you could always just type \r\n down here if it makes you happier. Now what I envision here is that my results are going to look ugly, but they're going to start at 30 and they're going to work their way down by halves and quit when we get to 0. Or not. Why not? It's 30 right there. Should have brought it in. Now, is my program stopped or is it in an endless loop? I can't really tell. I can't click. So my program is in what's called an endless loop. Right now, I don't know how. It's not really. Oh. Now I see it. I'm subtracting a negative 1/2. Whoops. Subtracting a negative half adds a half. If I keep adding a half, how long does it take before I get to 0? If I start at 30. We're never going to get there. It's called an endless loop. At some point, the operating system will say, this program's taking up way too many resources. It's been running too long. It's not getting anything done. It'll kill you. But that's where the red square comes in. If you write an endless loop, notice I could tell my program was in an endless loop because I couldn't type anything in it. I went to the text box and couldn't run it. Let's try that again. That's better. Okay, that's not bad, but I'd like to have that trailing 0. So now I can start thinking about all the things I want to tweak here and make it better. Okay, and the other thing I probably ought to consider is if the test score goes up to 100, and I can do that. It's going to need a little bit more space. So I would like all of these to take up the same amount of space, and I would like each of these to have 1 decimal place. So the first thing I'm going to do is make them all take up the same amount of space, and that's string.format. And then in the string format, there were quotation marks. Inside the quotation marks, there are curly brackets. And I got to look at my cheat sheet here because I forgot the syntax. I don't think it's in this program. Nope. Okay. And then after the curly brackets comes, what is it I want to display? So there's my string format. In here, there's always a 0, and how wide? How wide do I want it? 100.0, that's 5 columns wide. That's a comma, didn't look like it. 5 columns wide. And I always want 1 decimal place. Now, I've done this a lot, so I can kind of picture what's happening. What I advise you is to think about it. What do you think it's going to look like? Put the number you want in there, the format you want in there, run it again. If it doesn't look right, tweak it. Looks good with 30. It's got an extra space here. That's okay because it gives me the flexibility to change it to 100 and still have everything line up. Notice how my decimal places are not moving now. Everything's got 1 decimal place. Yes, sir?
Is it possible to make the numbers show up on the right side?
To make the numbers show up on the right side over here?
I mean, all the numbers, the column on the right-hand side of the...
Over here?
Yeah.
You'd have to figure out how wide this is and add X to make it that wide.
Awesome.
But I've got more stuff that's going here because remember my output's supposed to look like 100 points equals 100%. So by the time we're done, we'll be out here someplace anyways.
I got you.
So now we've got those in there. Let's just add the points equals. It shouldn't be too tough. I think I'm just going to start a new line so we can see what's going on. So after the number, I want to display a space and the word points equals. I'm building in phases. That's a good place to stop. Run it. Make sure that all the equals points line up. Looks good. And now I want to display, so once again, I'm going to start a new line. This is not a bad technique, just put the carriage return on its own line or at the end of the last thing that you're printing. But after this, what do I want to display? The percentage. Well, I don't have the percentage. I have 2 choices here. I could create a variable and calculate into the variable, or I can put it right in the equation. Tim, what do you think? In the equation, or you want a separate variable?
Still trying to catch up from last time.
Okay,
In the equation.
in the equation. So what Chris wants is right here, after the plus sign, do the calculation. How do I calculate the points, or the percentage? The points divide, really, points. Why is it doing that to me? I should have a variable called points at this point, should recognize it. Doesn't seem to want to. Maybe we'll find out why. Because the plus sign at the end here is missing, that's probably why. Divided by the max score, which is lowercase max score. Is it happy now? Yep, there we go. So I've done the calculation inside. I could have created a variable, defined it as a double, and then every time through the loop, do this little mini calculation. But in this case, I think Chris made a good choice. It's a small calculation. We only need it to display it, so we'll embed it right inside the output. See what that looks like? Should be kind of gross sometimes. Yeah, kind of gross looking. First of all, the 1 probably ought to show up as 100%. The 98.333 ought to be rounded. So I want this as a percent. And I want them all to take up the same amount of room because I'm anal. So now how many columns do I need? So I want to take this and I want to string format it. So I'm going to copy everything up to the 5. I'm just going to copy that and put it in front of this. How wide do I want it to be? Let's start with 5. I can always change it. Then comes my equation. And then I need one more parenthesis to end the string format. So now I want to think about it. 100.0, that's 5, but I also have a percent sign. And I know, and now you know, that when C# formats for percent, multiplies by 100, adds on the percent sign, but the percent sign includes a space. So I'm going to need a width of 7 here. 1.00.5, that's 5, space percent. A width of 7, and I want it formatted for %1. There is no way to get rid of this percent. There is. Everything's possible. It's a computer. I've been telling my second-year students, if you're not asking it to read your mind, I can probably make it do that. So if I don't like the percent sign separated like this, I could not format percent and add my own. But then I'd also have to multiply by 100 by myself because percent is doing that. For right now, I think I'll go with it. I can scroll all the way down and see the corresponding percents. I can bump the score up to 100 and see the percents there. My friend's happy. It's a little easier to please than my convenience store owner who had to tweak my program over and over and over again, but I've learned my lesson. I've been anal at the beginning and made everything line up right away, and everybody's happy. How can I improve it? I agree. It's perfect. Close it. Keep it handy. And let me just check real quick to see if I have a flowchart for that one so we can look at it. Except for variable names, it should be very, very similar. Why didn't I build the flowchart first? I probably did. But here I'm trying to get your head around for loops, and the flowcharts are already done. They're a little complicated to draw in class, so I've got them just on the sides. I can show them to you after the fact. Column headings, nickels, percents. There we go. Same concept. The only thing that's different is that we're going as long as we're greater than 0. It looks like in my design I said I'm not going to include 0. I'm going down by half, do the math. Here I used a variable. Notice 2 steps. A variable and then display the percent inside there. So even though Chris had a good idea, he wasn't following the design, but he couldn't have known. So there's another example that you have. The two are very similar, right? What's different is the first one counts up from 0 by ones. This one counts down from a variable to 0 by a half. But then once we got inside the loop, everything's kind of the same. Make numbers the same width, add some text in between, build it in phases. Instead of, go ahead, questions? Okay. Instead of confusing you more, I'm going to let you try it. Okay. There's a lab on the website. There's a starter, so you shouldn't have to do a whole lot of processing or a whole lot of form layout. So here's the loop. Okay. There's the starter. I have to check to see if they're on OneDrive. If they're not, I'll try to get them up there while you're looking. But I would just get them from my website. Let's take a quick look at what I want this to do. This form is already laid out. I want you to calculate if I invest $100 a month at 8.5% interest, good luck with that, for 30 years, how much money will I have at the end? And notice the way this runs. In the first month, you'll have $100. The next month, you'll have $100.71. Where'd the 71 cents come from? It's the interest for that 1 month. My advice to you is calculate the interest for a month and then the running total, kind of keep it going. But there's really no for loop problem here that you haven't already seen. But it does add some twists because there's 3 variables. This should be accurate. What this tells you is that after 30 years of $100, that's 360 months, you will have invested $36,000. One of the side effects of this is I hope to convince you to invest some of your money while you're young, because if you do it for 30 years, your $36,000 you'll see will grow quite well if you can get your 8.5%. First, write the loop. Then have the loop display the month number, then get the month numbers to line up just like we just did. Here's some instructions for how to get this done. There's a bit of work here that you haven't done, but I think if you put your heads together particularly, notice this. We haven't done that yet. But really all that is some text with some spaces, and you can display text using 2-string, hint, hint, or not 2-string, string format, hint, hint. My advice, work together in pairs. I'll give you the time that's left. If you don't want to finish it today because it's snowing like crazy outside, you can do it at home, turn it in later. What's the due date? 18th, December. But the point here is, I hope you stick around. The point here is for loops are kind of fresh in your brain. Here's a chance for you to try it. I'm going to take a quick look again to see if there's a for loop for this. Pre and post, progressive sale, nickels, column headings. Nope, sorry, no for loop or no flowchart. So you might want to scratch one out or wing it. It's a relatively small program like the ones we've done so far, just a little more complicated. You may begin. I'll be here to help. Follow the steps.